Hello, everybody. My name's James. Welcome to the Clayton and James Show. And I'm so sick of talking about Tottenham. I thought I'd talk about them a bit more. My name is James. How are you, Clayton?
I am good. I am excited for the Champions League tonight. We've done our preview pod on Patreon this morning, but yeah, looking forward to seeing the madness of 18 games at the same time.
Yes, the Goal Show is definitely getting a viewing this evening on TNT. We're not going to talk any more Champions League on this one, though. We haven't actually even got any Monday Night Football to review this week. So we've gone for a few different topics. We're going to be talking about David Coote's interview. We're going to talk about refereeing and VAR a little bit. Lots of controversy, obviously. Again, we spoke about it a lot on Patreon yesterday about Lewis Skelly's red card at the weekend, which obviously has inevitably been overturned. We're going to have a little look at what Clayton's doing in FPL because we haven't heard from you about that for a little while. Eurofocus takes us to Romania this week. And I tell you which club we're going to talk about, but it's one of two, so I'm not sure. On this day is a more recent one that I think nearly everybody will remember, and it's quite fantasy related as well. But we're going to kick off with a discussion, as I kind of alluded to at the top, because I'm sick of talking about Tottenham. I thought I'd talk about Tottenham a lot more because quite rightly, I think at the moment, people have begun to ask the question, should we really be calling it a big six anymore? Tottenham are in 15th. They'll probably be 16th by the time they next play in the Premier League. And Manchester United have also had a very difficult season. We have seen over the last two seasons, Aston Villa and Newcastle, both respectively finishing the top four. And we've also had the likes of Brighton, Leicester, and West Ham all breach the top six and finish in the top six since COVID. So, how big six is the big six in your view, Clay?
I kind of want to take it a step back from that. And growing up, it was always top four. I can't remember the transition to when the general dialogue around the air quotes big teams in the league, and I hate using that phrase because I know it comes across as condescending to the rest of the league, but like just general dialogue, that's what people say, right? Like I don't remember when the transition started from it becoming like the big four teams in England to the big six, and then to the second part of your thing. Like I don't really have any strong opinions on it. I think this is the thing. So you sent me an article in The Athletic, right? That I read, and prior to that, I used to always just think of, again, the big six as like the six strongest performing teams over a time period. Like I know yourselves and Man United are having crap seasons on the pitch. But then the one thing that shifted my perspective was reading that article, and like I didn't really, yeah, again, I guess it's on the pitch performance and commercial performance, and it's something that I'd never really account for the commercial things. And I think that's just me as a football fan, right? Like I didn't grow up bloody wanting to see the profit and loss spreadsheets of football clubs. I grew up watching football. But it's something that you have to account for. So yeah, my thing is, when did the top four become a big six anyway, as a conversation, and why? And in terms of the big six, yeah, I don't really have any arguments with the teams that are considered the big six, despite the struggles of Man United and Tottenham. But obviously, I'm an Arsenal fan, so in my head, I'm a bit like, why are Tottenham in there? Like, what have you guys done?
No, it's fair. It's fair, and I
Yeah.
have to take that on the chin. And I think ultimately there's a football conversation here, and then there's a non on pitch football conversation. Um, there was before the big four, Clates, there was a big five.
Did not know that.
So when the Premier League come into introduction in 1992, there was a traditional big five, which were known as our two clubs, Tottenham and Arsenal, the two clubs in Liverpool, Liverpool and Everton, and Manchester United. Those were deemed the traditional big five who had quite a bit of say in terms of what was happening with the introduction of the Premier League around about that time. Now, then through the 90s, Tottenham and Everton were both very bang average. Everton, on multiple occasions, very nearly fell out of the league. And Tottenham became kind of quintessential bang average mid table team year after year. And obviously, then Champions League places started getting added. So in like, I think it's 96, 97, it became to like the top two went in the Champions League. And then by the time you got into sort of the early noughties, it had already gone to four places. So it jumped quite quickly. And you'd had teams in and around the early noughties, like Leeds, obviously had a great team, spent a lot of money, and then obviously had to have a fire sale. It was pretty clear that obviously Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, and Manchester United were the regular top four, and it was hard to breach that. In terms of it changing to a big six, It had to change when Manchester City started spending money because of their power, right? And then they became the richest team in the league. And obviously, once they'd won the title in 2012, it was natural that they had to be part of that conversation because they'd finished second the year before, fourth or 50, I think 50 year before that. They'd grown to a point it was like they've hit it. Newcastle will probably eventually hit it at some point, maybe. But City then had to be part of the conversation. But once you did that and you looked back on that period, kind of from the point of sort of like 2005-ish, Tottenham had finished in the top six like every year, other than one. And then the one that we didn't was the last time we won a bloody trophy, by the way. We finished like 10th or 11th and won the Carabao Cup. So Tottenham were always there. And actually, Tottenham regularly, a lot of the times, Tottenham finished fifth. I mean, the amount of times it was Arsenal fourth and Tottenham fifth was,
Yeah.
there's a whole podcast there, right? So Tottenham were pretty much always in the top six. And from a commercial standpoint, Tottenham was starting to compete with the money that they were generating, not with yourselves, with your new stadium, or with Manchester United, and obviously couldn't compete with the riches of Manchester City. But commercially, we're making a lot of money in comparison to others in the league because we're qualifying for Europe every year consistently. And it was the odd years, obviously, like 2010, we qualified and finished for the top four. And then from 2016, we had like a 5 year period where we were in the Champions League every year. So from a commercial viewpoint, Tottenham are in there. One of the things with that people often say is, oh, it's a closed shop, like greedy six, big six, Super League six, whatever you want to call them. It's a closed shop. But actually on the pitch, we've seen for quite a number of years now that it's breachable.
Yep. Absolutely.
But there's a big difference between breaching it and staying there. And that's why I think Tottenham have stayed there. They stayed part of the group for a long time. Obviously not part of it right now on the pitch, but in all previous years have stayed close to it. Cut the years, finished like eighth. I mean, one of them you finished below us. I think you finished like ninth, for example. Always there or thereabouts. Whereas even if you look at the teams that have breached over the last 5 years, so Newcastle, third or fourth, qualified, deserved to do so, didn't qualify the next year. Villa did it last year. Don't at this moment look like they'll do it again this year. The others who've got into the top six, Brighton didn't do
Yep.
it again. West Ham didn't do it again. Leicester got relegated. So it's the staying there. So it's not that on the pitch it can't be breached. And there are so many good managers in this league now, managing with all due respect, some smaller clubs like Bournemouth, Fulham, Brentford doing really well at varying degrees of quality level. So you can breach into it. The difficulty is staying with it. And the reason it's so difficult to stay in is kind of what we're going to highlight with some of these commercial figures is the difference even from Tottenham to the rest
It's stark.
is still massive.
It's huge. Like that blew my mind. Like again, I don't really look at the commercials in football, to be honest. Yeah, I don't care. I honestly, I don't really care. But like when you sent me that article and I looked at it, I'd made an assumption Tottenham are very healthy financially because of the stadium, like because of all of that stuff. But flipping hell, yeah, I mean, I've got the article open now and looking at it, it's absolutely mind blowing the
So we've got a
difference
few
to the rest.
graphics we're going to show on YouTube, and these are taken from the Athletic, but they're also courtesy of they're actually from the Deloitte Money League table, and their table for the 23-24 season was published last Thursday. So what we've got on screen here is the revenue from the 21-22 season. And to highlight Tottenham on this table, they show up in ninth place in terms of revenue generated in the 21-22 season, which is sandwiched between Chelsea and Arsenal.
Yep.
Okay. And in a drop down for the next English club, you've got to go down quite a few places for West Ham, but it's the difference in money. Tottenham generated 522 million, West Ham 301. So it's nearly double. The next one, by the way, is Newcastle United at 212. Right, so Tottenham are 2.5 times more in terms of revenue generated than Newcastle. And it would certainly be fair to say that over the last few seasons as a combination, Newcastle since then have performed better than Tottenham. So in 22-23, does it level out a little bit? Well, no, actually, in that season, Tottenham's revenue was greater than Chelsea's in the 22-23 season. That has helped by being in the Champions League that particular season. But you've got Manchester United on 745 million revenue generated is fifth overall. This is all clubs in the world, basically, in football. Manchester City second, 825. And you've got Liverpool seventh, Tottenham eighth, Chelsea ninth, Arsenal 10th. Now, between Liverpool in seventh and Arsenal 10th, the difference is 140 circa million, 150 million. But then to drop down to Newcastle, 287 million, again, Tottenham's is more than double that. The most recent table has got a little bit more beef to it where you can break down certain things. So this is titled the 2025 Deloitte Football Money League, but it's from the accounts from the 23-24 season. And you'll see here again, this time Tottenham are sandwiched between Liverpool and Chelsea. Arsenal have jumped up to seventh. That's probably because of a sustained period of getting back in the Champions League over the last few years, whereas you had a 5 year period where you weren't in it, and that's why you did. So Tottenham, despite having no European football last year, in terms of revenue generated, still ninth, just behind Liverpool and just above Chelsea. Newcastle, the next best in the league at 15th, 371 million. It's no longer half of Tottenham, but it's still a massive drop from 615 to 371. And factor in, what did Newcastle have last year? Champions
No,
League
yeah.
football, admittedly only to the group stage, but they had six very prestigious ties. If they'd have gone further, they would have obviously generated even more money. But that's even with Newcastle playing in the Champions League and Tottenham not being in European competition at all. The difference between them is still absolutely huge. And this isn't, by the way, or Tottenham are bigger than Newcastle, because I don't think that's the case. Newcastle are a huge football club. It's just the difference in the revenue being generated is already monstrous. For Tottenham, obviously, it's a lot to do with the stadium.
From the Tottenham fans' perspective, I kind of I understand the frustration anyway, but this would make my blood boil, to be honest, because I think season ticket prices are extortionate, right? And I think you're paying a lot of money to watch a football team that probably isn't seeing the reinvestment of the revenue into the football club, which I imagine is where a lot of the anger stems from, and completely justified when you see graphics and data like this, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like when you look at everything in terms of what the revenue is doing at the moment, clearly Tottenham can't compete with Manchester City. Manchester United is just a huge behemoth in terms of what it is globally. But if you look at the revenues generated, yes, Tottenham should be competing with Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea. Now, it's not to say on a one-off given season. Obviously, City and United aren't competing with Liverpool and Arsenal this season, right? But in terms of if you're now looking at a wider context of what should Tottenham be over a 5 year period, a 10 year period, well, should be competitive, judging by this, with other clubs around them. This is why Tottenham still get groups in the top six, because the revenue is comparable to the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea, and Liverpool. That's why. It's an as an off-field discussion, it's still a big six. As an on-pitch discussion right now, if people want to say, why Tottenham in there? Absolutely. But
The
we're
whole
talking big, we're talking size, talking commercial.
You know the thing you mentioned earlier, like the some people perceive it as a closed shop. Like what do you think people actually mean by that as a closed shop? Like, because like I interpret that as a bit of an elitist group that feels like no one has the right to get into it. But like as we said, domestically, yeah, teams have broken through and get in there, and they for whatever reason can't sustain it. So like, how do you interpret that?
Well, if you look, people can take this as a dig if they want, right? But Manchester City spent their way there, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Tottenham did it organically through improved performance on the pitch of continuously qualifying for European competition and being very, very close to Arsenal, heartbreakingly close, year after year after year after year. And obviously improving the commercial revenue side of things. Tottenham have an advantage being in London. Clear, like it or not, it is. You only have to look at where West Ham sit on these tables. West Ham is 17th, right? It's higher than
Yeah,
Villa,
true. Yep.
right? West Ham generate more revenue than Villa. Let's put that into context. That will change next year because obviously Villa are in the Champions League this year. But right, if you're comparing Villa West Ham, you go, it's definitely Villa, right? Well, the commercial revenue of this suggests no. I've often said West Ham are one of them that eventually can potentially push through to be part of a big eight if that's what it becomes eventually or something. I think the idea of big in terms of on pitch probably needs to disappear. It's the dwarfing of the difference of these six teams. I just want to highlight where a lot of the differences come in terms of Tottenham and their revenue to others, right? So if you look at match day revenue, and it's kind of well documented what Tottenham can make in terms of on the day, we're potentially talking like 4 to 5 million a game. It's mad. And remember, these figures again, Tottenham played last year 21 home games. Two home cup games, Burnley and Manchester City, and massively discounted tickets because they were FA Cup games. So there's no European in this as well. So if Tottenham I've obviously in Europe this year, it's going to go up. Next year, we probably haven't got European football. It's going to come back down. But it's 123 million, right? That's
Hmm.
30 million more than Chelsea. Chelsea's also in London, but it's the volume of people you can get in the ground. But it's like it's nearly 50 million more than Newcastle.
Man
Newcastle's
City,
obviously a massive stadium.
Man City's is weird at 88. Why is that so low?
Pricing
All right.
got to be. It's called the empty had for a reason, isn't it? When by the way, it's a little bit of a myth, but yeah, they can't charge in the same way in terms of their match day revenue. Now, if you look at say the commercial difference between City making 406 to Tottenham's 297, that's obviously that's quite seismic, right? And Tottenham obviously suffered badly last year in terms of the amount of broadcast money they made. So if you look at the broadcast money last year between Tottenham and Newcastle, Newcastle was 214, whereas Tottenham was 194.
And is
So
that the difference in Europe or
Newcastle's 20 million more, yeah, because
right?
they're in Champions League.
Sure.
Yeah. So there are ways to breach it and hit back, but you need to do it consistently. So let's take Newcastle because we've mentioned them a few times, right? If Newcastle were to qualify for the Champions League 4 or 5 years in a row, that is your point where it is no longer a big six. Because Newcastle will then begin to generate a volume of money that is very close to Tottenham in terms of their revenue. And that's when it will change, where people will drop the line. And I'm going to bring it up because I know it's a stick often thrown at Tottenham. Like when the whole Super League thing happened, it was like, well, what Tottenham involved for? And it's right, like you can't argue it.
Money
But
talks.
but if you're putting together a Super League of 16 teams, well, you've seen consistently here that Tottenham are kind of, in terms of biggest clubs in the world for revenue, are between eighth and 10th, roughly.
Yeah, and it's
And it's
interesting. Like,
consistent.
yeah,
Whether they're in Europe or not, it's still there.
yeah, and the question I asked at the start, right, was obviously because of my age and when I was born, like not really understanding that context of it. Went from 5 to 4 to from 4 to 6, but I didn't make that connection on, yeah, damn, it did change when Man City started buying their way into it. And that's what changed the conversation. And as you've then pointed out now, like if Newcastle sustainably get themselves into Europe for a few years, their revenue will get to a point where we're then having a conversation around like a top eight, perhaps. So yeah, it's all money in it. This is what I don't like. I don't like the financial side of football just because I like the innocent child in me that grew up falling in love with watching football and not knowing about any of this shit, to be honest. But it's interesting. It's good to learn about it.
If you take Newcastle and Tottenham as an example, Newcastle will never, I don't think, even if they, and there's been a little bit of talk about like potentially having a new stadium round the back of St James's Park,
Okay, I'd not heard that.
or obviously they definitely can build up the Gallowgate end, right, to put more in the ground. At that point, the capacity will be the same as Tottenham, basically, if they just did that. They will not make as much money on a match day as Tottenham.
And is that location? Is that yeah,
It is.
sure.
It is. The London clubs can take the piss more on the ticket pricing.
Because of tourists and stuff as well, right?
There's that, but there's also the salaries. With all due respect, people in London would generally earn more in salaries than they do in the rest of the country, right? So from that point, Tottenham will always be more. But of course, if Tottenham continue to finish 15th year after year, then are 60,000 going to fill the stadium? Well, as you said, you mentioned the word tourists.
Mate, always, always. Yeah, they
Yeah,
will always
I
feel like I've seen it at Arsenal as well. Yeah.
I don't think Tottenham from here on in ever don't basically sell out or very close to sell out a Premier League game.
I've seen it with Arsenal. What was it?
Yeah.
There was a game last week I was telling you I'd be surprised if there's not t thousands of empty seats. Was it the Zagreb one? No,
And
I can't
and
remember.
that's why, by the way, to come around to talk like back to ticket price and say Tottenham fans will expect a certain amount. What do Tottenham fans expect stuff? Well, if we're getting charged like the highest ticket prices in the league, we have a right to expect something that's going to be a bit better than 15th. But it doesn't matter what they charge to fill. And this is why you can bang the drum back, stop exploiting loyalty, etc. Yeah, but that loyalty would draw enough people in. Now, in Newcastle's case, they've got an incredibly loyal fan base, and they too will always fill their stadium, but not to the same revenue that Tottenham will. Newcastle obviously doesn't have the corporate facilities that Tottenham do either, right? So I think it's what did Kieran Maguire worked out? I mean, it's like £85 a head they get from a Tottenham fan.
Wow.
It's this staggering, right? But this broadcast shows you where the gap can be narrowed. So Newcastle, 220 million more than Tottenham on broadcast last year. But if you look at commercial, which gets in things like your sponsorship money, merchandise, and also for Tottenham obviously been a name. Whether you like it or not, Tottenham got to a Champions League final in 2019, so that makes them very recognisable. Obviously, the stuff with the concerts, the NFL at the stadium, etc. The name's very recognisable. In terms of commercial income, Tottenham's 100 million more than Newcastle. Now, Newcastle might be in a position in a few years where they can sign whatever they want on a piece of paper, but also equally, if Newcastle got in the Champions League for 4 or 5 years consecutively, then obviously that revenue stream in terms of your sponsorship goes up astronomically, right? And then suddenly you narrow the gap. Where the only thing Newcastle can't bridge against Tottenham is actually the volume they make on a match day, but they might supersede it in terms of TV revenue and commercial revenue. That's when it's no longer a big six.
So for teams outside of London and that aren't in the position like Newcastle are right now, that have, so I'm going to group a combination of different teams. So like your Brightons, your Bournemouths, your Forest this season, your Villas, like those teams that fit those categories. What do they need to do, or what is in their capability and their control to infrastructure wise set themselves up to sustainably be one of these air quotes
You have
big
to be
six clubs?
different. Like Brighton and Brentford as examples have acted in the transfer market. And I think people cotton on that Bournemouth have been doing the same now as well, right? So there's plenty of good players. Look at Bournemouth's backline, right? Kirkez, House, and Zabani as three of the four at the moment. Right. Nearly every club would want to go and have those players at the moment, but nobody had heard of them before they went there, realistically, right? So club Bournemouth into that group. So it's thinking differently and being better in the competition because you can compete on levels like how you scout and your analytical stuff. There's nothing to stop you being better in those sort of departments. So you have to do differently. In the cases of, let's say, those three clubs, Forest is a little bit different. But in those three clubs, you've always got a ceiling.
Why?
Bournemouth are never going to get 50,000 people in a ground, mate.
Oh,
It,
from that perspective,
they
yeah,
could
understood.
win the league 10 years in a row. They're still not going to happen. It's where
Yeah.
they are and who they've been, right? Bournemouth fans will openly admit they're a small football club.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's never going to hit different. Whereas Newcastle doesn't have a limitation, right? If you built a ground that was 100,000 people and Newcastle playing in the Champions League, good chance they'll fill it, right? So there isn't a limitation on something like a Newcastle, and like a Bournemouth there is. Forest is like a middle ground there, big
yeah.
football club, but 60,000 every week, not sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd love to hear from the fans of those clubs. Like the idea that there is a ceiling on you. Like, how do you feel about that and stuff? And like, because if Bournemouth consistently finish in the Europa League spots for the next few years, like,
You begin to make it up, yeah,
yeah.
but it will never that them you will never have, sorry to say this, unless they were able to spend the sort of money that Manchester City was spending way more than everybody else because it's not organically done. It's just because you've got an owner that can spend way more. That's the only way you're ever getting a Bournemouth bridge that because it will never make commercially what even a Tottenham makes. Never mind a United, a City, or an Arsenal, Liverpool, right?
Mm. Yeah,
Just
that's kind of
won't.
shit.
A Newcastle could. An Aston Villa could. This tells us a West Ham United
But
even could,
that's why I
right?
was trying to focus on the teams outside of London because of West Ham in there. Yeah.
But for like a Bournemouth, no. But it doesn't mean you can't still be successful. If you're a Bournemouth fan, realistically, you're not sitting there dreaming of going, I want to win the title 10 years in a row or be the biggest club in England. I don't dream of Tottenham being the biggest club in England because I know it's a food chain, right? My club is never going to generate more revenue, I don't think, than Manchester United ever, no matter what happens.
Yeah, I'm an Arsenal fan and I'd say I'm the same, but it doesn't mean that looks like from an Arsenal perspective, for whatever reason, like where we are now, but even when Arteta came in, like my long-term thinking was I want Arsenal to be back at the top table and sustainably competing for the Premier League. Like where I can't remember what the difference was in revenue, but like we're behind Man United, and nor do I ever think we're going to surpass them. It doesn't mean that I don't think we can compete with them.
No, I mean, you look at the commercial difference between Manchester United and Arsenal as a comparison. Manchester United, 100 million more last
About,
season.
but yeah, I mean, and that
Admittedly, that is a year where United have been in the Champions League as well. So it'd be interesting to see how maybe that looks next year. But I just think as a global brand, it's still going to be United.
always, absolutely. Yeah, but well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, despite that, you can still compete with them.
Absolutely. This is the point. And it's really lovely to see on the field that Bournemouth and Forest are doing this. I was looking at this is an account I mentioned a few times, football rankings.
Yeah, yeah, you've mentioned it,
He's
yeah.
he's already started doing the projections for next season.
On revenue.
No, not on revenue. In terms of like pots for the
Oh,
European
right.
competitions and stuff, right? So he's currently got it projected as Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest to be England's two teams in Europa League next year.
That's class.
Yeah, and I'm thinking it might only be fourth for Champions League next year, right?
Yeah.
Because you need them teams to do well. But it's a lovely story having them in. And you know what? For every neutral, I mean, you and Liverpool obviously going to be the top two. But how great would it be if Bournemouth were third and Forest were fourth, right?
Oh,
For
absolutely.
example.
Yeah,
It's
100%.
brilliant. We don't want this. This is why people love the Leicester story so much, right? It's like, oh, so people are still allowed to dream. And exactly that, right? Bournemouth or Nottingham Forest are never going to be the biggest club in this country. But neither's my club. And we're considered part of this like big six, right? It doesn't mean you can't still do things. Doesn't mean look where United are, right? Half the league's above them. So it's not like you can't still compete. United have obviously been run like a shit show for a really, really long time. Tottenham has actually been run well, but the football side of it is obviously a massive problem at the
See,
moment.
I find this shit, just like I don't know, it's the realization of like yeah, the food chain, isn't it? Like I get your point, like I 100% agree, right? Like if you're a Bournemouth fan, you're probably not thinking of winning the title in 10 years time or not. But like I'm a dreamer, right? Like I'm a very romantic person the way I view life. I'm like, why not?
And and
Very naive.
and it's this sort of thing. To give you an example, I'll give you two examples in terms of like the football food chain here, right? Tottenham might dispose of their manager soon, right?
Hmm.
Clearly that could happen if shit continues to go badly, right? I think it's quite widely agreed that Tottenham would probably be interested in Andoni Iraola.
Yeah.
Now, it's not to say that Andoni Iraola will take the job, but a lot of people will say, well, why would he go from Bournemouth to Tottenham? You only have to look at this page of money to tell you why
It's the
that
ceiling
he
of what
could
he
go.
could do with those resources, right?
Similarly, Christian Romero has 2 years left on his Tottenham contract. If Real Madrid want him this summer, he probably goes to Real Madrid because that's where Tottenham are on the food chain. They're not at that top table, right? It's one below. And your clubs like Bournemouth are below that. And now Bournemouth will pick off from every fucking championship club, despite many in the chat. If Bournemouth want to buy a player from Leeds, right? Leeds is an infinitely much bigger football club than Bournemouth, right? But if Bournemouth want to buy a player from Leeds, probably going
Yeah.
because that's where the chain is at the moment on money. And in terms of money, Tottenham is still part of a big six.
Yeah, fair play. No, thanks for talking me through that. Like I said, I usually don't give a shit about this sort of stuff, and nor do I typically understand it, but you've explained that pretty well.
This is the sort of shit I also normally lead to search on our Money in Football podcast on Patreon. Let's move on to referees. I want to have a bit of a chat about VAR, but firstly, David Coote has obviously done an interview with The Sun, where he's come out and admitted that he's gay. And obviously, he's not going to appeal his decision that he's been sacked by the Premier League. He's done an interview, which I completely understand, and I think he's warranted that he's got shit off his chest, which is, I imagine, for him, just him for the moment, as from a mental health perspective, him getting that stuff off his chest and explaining him, he's probably quite right. He didn't feel like he could be himself in a male dominated football world. We've had this conversation long at times, and that led to him doing misdemeanors off the pitch, not in being gay, but the fact he couldn't be himself around this, that he ended up doing some misdemeanors off the pitch. He was obviously caught with saying some dumb things about Jurgen Klopp and also taking some recreational drugs, let's say, after being the VAR official for a European Championship quarterfinal. He was not doing it during. This was the day after. I have a couple of problems with it though.
Yeah, so do I.
One, you've really pissed off the Liverpool fan base, so don't do an interview with the Sun. Two, it was the Sun that leaked all your stuff in the first place, but you've still done the interview with them.
Yep.
Hmm.
I don't want to be cynical, but yeah.
But it's difficult not to be.
Yeah, like, and
So
I
there's
must,
sympathy and there's also not.
yeah, literally, and like, I, I can't confess to have the first idea of what that feels like to live your life in that position, right? I can't pretend to, but like, I can, at the same time, practice empathy, and like, I imagine, yeah, like you say, it probably helped him a lot get off his chest, but. And on one hand, I hope this does pave the way for people that are maybe aspiring referees or footballers to come out and like maybe not hide it so much in that, yeah, like I've made an assumption football is such a male egotistical world to be in, and I imagine it's hard, but like just the circumstances of doing it like this, like really, like, I'm gonna sound like a prick, but it doesn't sit right if I'm being honest.
Same. I have huge respect for his openness. I just don't like how that openness has been done.
Yeah, yeah. But the one thing I'd say is I do hope if one positive can come from this, like he's obviously been fired from his profession, right? I do hope that this can maybe pave a new pathway for him and like a new career somewhere else where he feels fulfilled and energized, but like just within the circumstances of football. And also, like, again, I'm going to sound cynical, but like, why now? Like, why is it, sure, getting it off your chest, telling your story, but like, why?
I have more of a problem with the choice,
Yeah,
personally. Like
yeah,
they stitched him
100%.
up.
And
Liverpool
why are you
fans
going with them?
obviously
Yeah,
won't deal with that rag whatsoever, and then that's if you're looking for some sympathy back from them, you could literally couldn't pick anyone worse to cover your story.
literally.
That
Yeah.
they are probably the guys who probably offered the most money. So I think there was something there that possibly could have been a bit more principled. That went, hang on, I'm not dealing with you. So did he ultimately take the big paycheck? There's no
Well,
way of us
that's
ever proving that, right? But it raises that suspicion, unfortunately. I think huge credit to him to coming out and being open and honest because do you know what? He could have just like gone behind the scenes and never told his story. And I also think he's clearly suffered some mental health issues. We shouldn't like discredit that. And the fact that he's been open about how he feels, you know what? If it's what we always say, right? If it helps one person, like well done, right?
and that's what I hope it does. Yeah.
Absolutely. But also with what's happened to him, it has put a mistrust back into referees
It's just
generally, right?
it's common sense. Like I can't get this in my head. It's the sun. Like it's Liverpool. I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, I don't suppose he was probably thinking about Liverpool, but those are the people that aimed the biggest abuse at him, which is, and we use the term fans a little bit loosely here because I don't think, for example, moving the conversation on, I don't think it's Arsenal season ticket holders, for example, that have been sending Michael Oliver death threats.
No.
Tell me if you think that statement is wrong, Clayton.
No, I do not think that statement is wrong.
Right, might be Arsenal fans in terms of loosely of the word. I don't think this is people that go and support their football team, then think afterwards, I'm going to send death threats to a referee. Like clearly that's not on, but
Of course not.
I don't believe that there's an Arsenal fan that was in the away end at Wolves that when I'm going to send a death threat to him afterwards. Clearly, like it's not on and it's gone too far. But
Absolutely, yeah.
we should be careful with labelling Arsenal fans, for example, here, or Liverpool fans previously with aiming death threats at a referee. They're not these people aren't proper representations of their football club if they're pushing it that far because ultimately they are human. They make mistakes. Michael Oliver made a mistake on Saturday. Yes, there have been several mistakes, unfortunately, relating to Arsenal. In the same way, Chelsea fans think Anthony Taylor has got it in for them, and yet they've only lost one of the last 17 games he's refereed them in, for example, I think. They are human, and it's easy to forget that because we also expect referees to be robotic. The biggest problem on Saturday, as we discussed yesterday with the Lewis Skelly incident, was Michael Oliver thought he saw something that was incorrect. VAR should have intervened and helped him. I want to talk about VAR a little bit because, and I know it's a conversation people hate. People know my opinion. I want to get rid of it. I've watched games this season, including, I'll give an example, Carabao Cup quarter final against Manchester United. Heung-min Son flights a corner in, goalkeeper flaps. We can go crazy because I know the referee has pointed back the centre circle and that's the end of it. I wouldn't celebrate that goal if it happened in the Premier League because I'd know, oh, it's dodgy that.
Yeah, you said that
It'll
for a
get
while.
looked at. I hate that. I hate the loss of emotion in not being able to celebrate goals so often. Anyway, we're not going to get rid of it though. There's no point. It's here to stay. There are a few things I want to raise in terms of potentially improving VAR. Footage in the stadiums.
What about it?
Right. I know why they don't do it because they're too worried to incite the crowds. Many of you will probably seen incidents this year where a VAR decision is given, and this will happen if you're watching the TV. If you've never noticed it before, you won't unnotice it now. A VAR decision is given like a red card. Let's say a player playing at home gets sent off, and so then they show the crowd after the decision's been made a replay of the incident to be like, yeah, this is why we sent him off, and then you'll hear the crowd like boo.
Yeah,
Even though you're what are they booing for? It's obviously like a red card, but it's just bias of football fans, right? They're going to do that. So they don't show the footage because they're too worried about inciting the crowd, right? But we've already had a conversation on this podcast about ticket prices. It should blow everybody's mind that the people in the stadiums have less idea of what's happening than the people that are sitting at home.
That's the biggest thing for me. I've been in grounds and games where I'm texting my mates who are at home or in the pub, like, what's going on? Like,
I'll,
that's
I will give you an example. So it was at Carabao Cup semi-final first leg, Tottenham against Liverpool a few weeks ago. Dominic Solanke goes through one-on-one. I don't celebrate it because even though the goal was given at the time, because I know that there's a good chance this is offside. Okay. Then we get a delay. And I have to go onto our Slack with our patrons to see what the patrons are discussing to give me the quickest idea of if this goal is likely to be given or not. And the practicality of that is ridiculous. Okay. And I had the information. Then once I had the information that the goal was going to be called off, it was still another minute inside the stadium before it was confirmed to anybody that the goal was going to get disallowed. This was extra long because they had to mic up the referee so he could announce it's offside. No fucking shit, Sherlock. Like you don't need to do that, right? And you wouldn't need to do it if you just showed people the same replays that you're showing people on the television and treat people like they are human and trust them to get on with it.
yeah, I
People will
don't
get used to it. They're too worried about inciting the crowds. That's what it is.
yeah, but like what is that? I get it and I don't get it. Like, what difference is it going to make? Like, yeah, sure, you wind up a crowd, but like, it's the same way in every game. Like, you'll talk to a fan. Oh, ref was against us today. Like, you're gonna get that shit in every game where the kind of biases creep in and stuff. So, like, what difference does it make as long as you're then transparent and yeah, the match going fans that pay for those tickets have the same level of information as the people that aren't in the ground? Like, I don't get it.
Quite often there's a VAR check and you don't even know what's going on. I mean, the way it's done, it's so botched. I've been in grounds where it's like there's been a VAR check for a penalty, and then someone's announcing it like 5 minutes later. No penalty given. VAR complete. What are you doing?
There's an Arsenal podcaster who is quite well known. His name's Clive Palmer from the Arsenal Vision podcast, right? And
Yeah, he's
he
good, Clive. I know
really
he's very
good,
well respected. Yeah.
very, very well respected. Like I could not pick a guy to represent the fan base better if I tried. But I think he's from like a corporate background, and he made a really good point once that has just stuck with me, where it's like in the corporate world and in the world of offices, right? When you have VAR and the introduction of it against the laws, it's a process, isn't it? And usually, when you're implementing new processes within the world of work and anything to do with a new set of rules or behavior changes, you go through a process of that process where you vet it at every stage. And it does come across like they've really not done their due diligence on the implementation of it and scenarios X, Y, Z and the permutation of this, which you usually get I mean, the big four in corporate, like KPMG, I forgot the others now, but all of those like auditors and stuff. But they are literally the type of companies that will go into an organization, they'll vet those processes, they'll make sure they're fit for purpose. And it does feel like we've gone and done this without any of that kind of real due diligence. And yeah, it's just something he said once, and it wasn't even this big point, but it's something that stuck with me. And it grows in my brain as this seed that's been planted every passing week when we have a new discussion. And even I'm so tired of discussing it, but it's something you can't really escape from it.
Yeah, I do have some sympathy with the Premier League specifically in the case their hands can be tied a little bit by UEFA's governance on. So I think like on replays, the Premier League would probably be one of the first who wanted to push the boundary in terms of showing them. I don't think they can. So it's a
Why
broader
can't?
comp because UEFA won't allow it,
All right,
as in like show it at the same time as TV. That's
sure.
what should be happening. But no one wants from I think any governing body to have this moment where they're showing in front of say at White Hart Lane 60,000 people watching the TV and someone's trying to put the line in the right place. Like I mean that in itself if we even just think about that and you think hold on that's stupid. And then yeah, actually this is how we're using this at the moment. Well, we shouldn't be using it practically, right? It's taking too long. Anyway, a few other things I want to get rid of. Scrap going to the screen in case of clear and obvious. Right, just
Uh,
wasting everybody's time.
yeah, it's confirmation for them, isn't it? It more than anything is.
At first, they didn't do that, right? So you'd get the referee got told, okay, no, that red card's wrong, change your mind, or yep, that's a penalty, give the penalty, right? And people didn't like it because they felt that the referee wasn't in control. So they came up with this nonsense where the referee will go to the screen and now he's in control and it's his decision. And the referee goes to the screen how many times and goes, actually, no, I'm going to stick with my own decision. So referee's not in control. Someone else
Yeah.
has already made that decision.
Yeah, and even that,
And you're wasting everybody's time.
one of my biggest pet peeves with this as well, though, is like the kind of the replaying of things in slow motion, the showing them stills, like it, you're re-refereeing the game then at that point. Like I don't agree with the kind of process of how that's done either, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd like that to go back to what it was, but they just get told, look, sorry, Michael, you're wrong now. That should be a yellow card.
And that's what I
Um,
thought it was in. That's what I thought it was being brought in for.
yeah, but now they've got it. They've said it now. They want a high bar, and this is it's kind of contradictory, but I do understand the thought process. They want a high bar because they want VAR's interference to be minimal.
Yeah, I
But
get
it
the logic
also
there.
means that we can have a decision where 95% of us go, well, actually, no, I don't think that's a red card for Lewis Skelly. But because there's 5% of the action, as I explained on Monday, is like, well, was there light intent? It's like a stamping action a little bit. Actually, yeah, maybe that's what Michael saw. We'll go with that. And yet, it don't take how long for a Monday to turn around and go, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Don't ban him for 3 games. Yellow card's enough. I don't think gets yellow card now, does he? He doesn't have a yellow card, stands on his record, just gets a red card overturned, doesn't he?
Mm.
One of the things I'd like, and I know this is a lot of people disagree with this opinion, I'd like referees to have the power to ask for a review for themselves on game-changing incidents. What I mean by game-changing incidents is sending a player off is a game-changing incident. If you're potentially given a penalty for something that you're 50-50 on, it's a game-changing incident. People can harp on about, oh, Arsenal shouldn't have had a corner against Tottenham that led to a goal. I mean, if we're going to do it for that, just the game's never going to fucking stop, right? But that, when you're sending Lewis Skelly off, if Michael Oliver's 100%, fine. But I don't think you can be 100%.
No
The
way,
best thing
not a
you could
chance.
do there is I would like it. He goes, right, I've seen one angle of it. I think that's a red. I'd like to see another view. Why not?
I guess
Game
that.
changing like that.
And when you're talking about, did you say you want like a what was it? A review thing in place where they have a certain amount of game or something? What was it?
No, no, I know
Oh,
people talk about challenges and stuff. I'm
right.
I'm not so big on
Because I
that
guess the
side
danger
sort
of
of
that
idea.
then is like that could open up a whole rabbit hole, right?
There is a
Of
danger that particularly I could foresee, yes, in UEFA games where you've got a referee going to the TV every 5 minutes, particularly, yeah. And I know people want to bash our referees, but yeah, you should see some of the ones you get in Europe sometimes, particularly in Thursday night football. By the way, Clayton,
I
let me add
from
one.
from the handful of Arsenal games I've watched this season in the Champions League, I've quite liked the refereeing in that competition, to be fair. But
You should have the best referees in Europe in the Champions League, no?
I feel like
Yeah.
that's what I've been watching
Well,
so
good,
far.
good, good, good. Um, one of the other things I'd really like to change is if they are going to be insistent the referee goes to the monitor because they disagree with a decision the referee's made, stop telling him shit.
Yeah, like even that, just let him come to his own conclusion.
Right. So example would be let's take Lewis Skelly because it's the one that's kind of fresh in our mind, right? So get it, Michael, go to the TV and review that. Don't tell him nothing. Just don't just say, look, Michael, we'd like you to have a look at a different angle of this. Don't say nothing else. Let him decide. And then if Michael Oliver says, yeah, do you know what? I saw it from this angle and now I'm looking at this angle. And then he wants to ask for a second opinion, fine. But you're saying, oh, I want to leave the referee in charge. But you're just telling the referee before he even gets to the screen, it's like, Michael, we're calling you over because there's not a stamp action here, and we think this is only a yellow card. Like it would be so obvious that he's going to change his mind. So you're not letting him referee the game. You're already telling him. And if the VAR is an experienced one, I know there's a lot of people saying it was a younger, inexperienced VAR, so he didn't want to tell Michael Oliver he was wrong. Well, it's even worse the other way around. If Michael Oliver is telling a young, experienced referee on the pitch that it shouldn't be a red card, he feels like he's got to listen to Michael Oliver,
Yeah,
right?
I think in terms of experience dynamics, you're never going to get that correct, to be honest. I think as long as you've just got people that are fit to do the job, it doesn't matter in terms of age and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I think there are some common sense fixes here for things. The experience for the fans, I've been screaming this now for 5.5 years.
Yeah, and you're
It's
bang on. They're not going to get rid of it, so it's like, how do we live with it to
well,
make
yeah.
it
Let's
better? And
let's make it better. The experience in the grounds has got to be
it's
better.
fucking abysmal in
That's
the ground,
it's designed for
honestly.
television,
Yeah.
and if you get to the point, it's really dangerous. There's a lot of stop exploiting loyalty. We've already done it, ticket pricing, etc. If it hits a point where the football fan goes, my experience is better on the TV, your product is fucked. Because I don't suppose anybody wants to go back watching like football in COVID and stuff, right?
Mate, honestly, like, so I've had to watch I've got a season ticket, as most people will know. I've had to watch the last couple home games at home. I would say part of my experience was better watching it at home compared to being in the ground. And that's a concern. Well, I'm not saying it was definitive, but like there was definitely part of it that was better. I was like, I don't like this. Yeah, and I've been watching a lot more non-league football the last 2 years because of the state of the technological interventions in football. I don't really like where it's going. Personally, I sound a bit of a dinosaur, sound a bit your dad. I get it, but like I find it so refreshing every now and then when I go and watch non-league football.
Well, I'm going to start watching some championship football to familiarise myself, obviously. Shall we talk about your? We could go on forever with VAR. Should we talk about your FPL team, mate? How's it looking?
It's a mixed bag, mixed bag. I finally got a green arrow for the first time in what felt like ages from the week just gone. But in terms of chip strategy, just very high level, I've still got wild card left, bench boost, Arseman, uh, and free hit. I've used my triple captain. I am intending to get to 29 without using my free hit. I am one of those people that just prefers the vibes of using a free hit in a double game week. But I also think I was looking at a free hit draft, and like I know the big thing is City, no City. Can I get to Haaland? Can I not? Kind of thing with 29. I just want to see if I can get through without it. I think I'll be able to cover most of the template in free transfers for blank game week 29. In terms of what I do next, I mean, how should I do this? Should I read out my bus team or?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Yeah, so bus team is I wanted to before I read out the bus team, I wanted to get Gakpo in last week, right? And I just couldn't figure out how to do it without keeping. No, I wanted to get Gakpo in, didn't know how to do it without not losing Isaac. Usually, when I'm unsure, I just roll. And like what I did with Saka, I forced myself into a decision I regret. So when Saka was out, I went Odegaard. Knew I didn't really want to, didn't know where I wanted to go, stuck with Odegaard. I've done the same in a different scenario here where I wanted Gakpo for the double, despite me personally having a little bit of concern on his minutes across the two. I'm the minority there, but yeah, I've flipping got Allison in now, so I've got three Liverpool in Allison, Trent, and Salah. So there's me at the minute. Bus team is Allison in goal, back three of Colwill, Trent, and Mikalenko. I've got Palmer, Cliver, Eze, Odegaard, and Captain Mo in midfield, and up top I've got Isaac and João Pedro on the bench. Fabianski, Gabriel, Raul, Jimenez, and Anderson. Bust. I've been looking at a couple of things. Like to be honest, right now, like I don't definitively know what I'm doing. I've looked at a couple of things. One was which I quite liked, was a little bit of a Sky terminology thing here, but a little daisy chain on the strikers where, I mean, I don't know if I want to go to Ndai anymore, to be honest, but a daisy chain involving maybe moving to another forward from Jimenez for the double, and then having enough bank money in the bank to go from that forward to Havertz for Leicester away, West Ham at home, and then looking at Chelsea's Nicholas Jackson for Southampton home, Leicester home. Like I feel like that's quite a nice daisy chain looking. But the immediate things are I look at Odegaard there, I just don't like it. And then obviously the long term thing is how can I get to 29? Wildcard, I'm not sure. I listened to the chip pod you did with Serge like 30, 31. I'll see which one lands better for me. Bench boost free here. I'm just going to decide in and around when I use Arsman as well. But even Arsman, I'm kind of keeping it for that period where I think there could be a few opportunistic periods. So that's a bit where I'm at. I don't definitively know where I'm going. Like I was eyeing up Calvert-Lewin to be honest prior to his injury. I mean, does Beto come onto the table and die? Like, do I
No.
want him?
You've got to think as
But
well, Everton, there's every chance they're going to buy a forward.
exactly,
So
yeah.
by the time
So
the Liverpool game comes around, someone else is in the team.
yeah,
Because
I
that's
think
not
if
till 12th of February, right? It's like 2 weeks today.
exactly, yeah. I think if deadline was tonight, I'd probably do something like I want to get Bumo back in, so I think I'd probably just go like Odegaard to Bumo. Uh,
Looks obvious, mate.
it does look obvious, don't it? I've got three free transfers actually. So and then probably just roll the others to be honest. I don't know. Is there anything that springs to mind for you?
I mean, the first thing I wanted to ask you was why are you playing Colwell over Gabriel?
West Ham, was it the last game where West Ham just didn't have a shot? Like I think Man City will
He
score
played well in the
against them.
last half hour at Villa.
Oh, sorry,
I've
I
probably
meant
got Bowen back next week, probably.
the game prior to that.
And if you want to hear about more about Chelsea versus West Ham, clash of correspondence tomorrow. Gary Mantle and Chris Stones sold.
Very nicely done. Yeah, I think it was one of them where I was looking at bookies odds for clean sheets and stuff, and I think whenever I play defenders, that's always what I look at. There's a really good account, Rob T FPL on Twitter. I always look at his stuff when I'm struggling with 50-50s on who to play defenders was. And I know Gabriel bullet header this that he did it at the Etihad, but it's just the process I go through when I'm struggling to decide on defenders, and I always rely on bookies odds for stuff like that. And I think when I looked, Chelsea's was slightly higher than Arsenal's.
I would go through the process of looking at Chelsea's clean sheets this season and how they actually defend.
Yeah,
All I'd say is this: if you were asking Gary Mansell, our Chelsea correspondent, I would look at that and he'd be like, "What are you doing, mate?" I'm
yeah,
telling you, that's what he
fair.
would say. And I
Yeah,
think West Ham will be more competitive now with Potter in charge. And if Caldwell did keep a clean sheet and his 6 points, like
yeah, it's
great,
6 points at
it's
most, though.
great. But it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to much other coverage. Or if Gabriel rocks in his 15 pointer in the 1-0 Arsenal, mate, you are sick.
And I had it on the bench the first time round. So I love me a bit of pain. But yeah, look, to be fair, that's something that like I put together. I mean, it's my bus team, right? I hadn't really put too much thought into it, but yeah, that is definitely the process I go through though when I look at defenders. But yeah, as it gets to deadline, yeah, probably will switch that. It's more the others on like the yeah,
Odegaard to Boomer looks pretty obvious, I
I
think.
think so. Yeah, I think so. It's more the strikers like
Well,
him
what
in.
I'd say on the strikers is, you got money in the bank or not?
What do I have in the bank? I've got nothing in the bank. No.
Okay. Well, Odegaard to Bumo, I mean, is that similar price? I don't even know what Odegaard is. Is it eight?
Odegaard, I think, is eight. He's 8.2, and Bumo is 7.8. So that gives me point 0.4. So yeah, I can't really do much there, to be honest.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be worth taking a hit anyway. I'd say what I would say is just a little one, and I keep saying this is extremely unlikely, but I wouldn't sell Fulham players this week.
Why is that again?
So obviously, look, it's Newcastle away this week. It's a bad fixture. There is a tiny chance that Fulham Tottenham is brought forward to game week
That
25.
was it to
And I
25, yeah.
know some people have even been speculating sort of up to like 15% or so. For my opinion, I think it's way, way lower than that. I'd actually group it as sort of well under a 5% chance. But you would be sick if you sold Jimenez and then suddenly he's literally walking into a double game week.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't force that out if you don't know where you're going. Pedro, I'd be looking at as moving on. I mean, could you go Pedro to Vissa? And I've kind of been down on Vissa this week because of the potential that he could move, but it's only that we know that one bid came in from Forest. I don't actually think he'll move. Could you go Pedro to Vissa?
No, put point 0.4 off being able to do that. I mean, the other one I was looking at, to be honest, is Isaac. Like, Fulham at home, fine, but then it is City away, Forest home, granted, but Liverpool away then. Like, I mean, the form he's playing, like, do I want a
Yeah,
chance of.
vibes, Clates. Get rid of the most informed player in the league. Why don't you? Yeah, vibes.
No, but despite the vibes meme, like I'm a fixtures guy, and I'd look at that set of three and it's like that's pretty shit.
Yeah. I'd be very careful, particularly about it's Man City away after Fulham for Newcastle, and it's
Correct. Yeah.
Forest at home afterwards. And I don't feel great, but Forest just conceded five in their last away game. I would suggest to you that captaincy in game week 26 is bad, and it might even land that we get there, and it's like the swell is I'm going Isak home game at St James's.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
Salah's at City and Palmer's at Villa. I want to say.
Yeah. Palmer's
I
away
think
at Villa. Yep. Yeah. Okay. That's a good point.
so. You might even okay, it's not great, but that might even be what you want to do with the captaincy in game at 26. So yeah, I wouldn't be selling his at the moment. Also, I mean, if you do turn it round against Newcastle in the Carabao Cup, it's not impossible. Then you will definitely want to keep Isak on the path to 29.
Mm.
So again, these things where you're going to learn a lot of information throughout this double game week with the additional cup fixtures, both in the Carabao and the FA Cup. Yes, we will do chip strategy again for you guys on the Monday after the FA Cup full round games. Um, I would not be binning a player like that, mate. No
No.
chance.
Yeah. I think it's one of them where to be it's been poor planning, like no other way around it. But I think the way I've landed this week, the most sensible thing for me is probably just Odegaard to Bumo, roll the others, reassess with more information week on week, and just take it from there. I think this is a situation where I can't really. I feel like I've boxed myself in a little bit with the structure of my forwards. And yeah, I think
To
probably just
simplify, many of the conversation we've been having had a few of our patrons yesterday as well. Realistically, this week there were only four teams you're buying from: Everton, Liverpool with a double, Bournemouth and Brentford. And
yep.
Bournemouth doesn't feel quite right this week because they are actually playing Liverpool, but we're well aware of what happens afterwards. Brentford obviously can still attack. For a little bit of a Tottenham update in relation to Sunday, we know Mickey van der Ven completed full training yesterday. Christian Romero did not train. So that's the latest on the Tottenham defensive situation. There's obviously another game before Sunday on Thursday. In any case, a Tottenham vulnerable whoever plays defensively. Yes, I'm not going to put you people off buying Boomer or Vissa. Other than, as I said, a little bit of concern on could Vissa move, but it does seem like a strange one to me.
The one thing I do really like doing, by the way, I just need to find how I'm going to do it, is that daisy chain. Like I said, I think those four fixtures of Havertz for two, Jackson for two could be really nice. I just need to figure out how I can try and do that.
I mean, Jackson's probably staying for me. I mean, I know what I'm doing. I mean, the one thing with the cock up last week just simplifies everything. I'm wildcarding 35, I'm Arseman 36 or 38, and I've
Yeah.
got nothing in between. So it's just simplified the whole game for me from that perspective. Okay, let's go to Romania,
Ha!
Clates.
Where to begin with this? The two teams in the country fighting for the identity of one. So, we are talking about FCSB. And now I think a lot of the listeners would have heard of a team called Steaua Bucharest, right? And I'm going to let you make your own conclusions. Are we talking about the history of Steaua Bucharest within the context of FCSB,
You tell
or
me,
an,
mate.
or another team that are navigating the lower tiers of the Romanian league? So to do this, I will rewind to the year 1947, which is when the football club FCSB was actually founded.
But
And
they
this
weren't
was
founded as FCSB, right?
no.
Okay.
They were so this was actually as part of the army. It was the Army Sports Club. It was founded as at the time ASA Bucharesti, and this, like I said, part of the Army Sports Club. It was under the Ministry of the Defense. That's a key bit of information to remember as we go through here, right? It was part of the Army Sports Club as the Ministry of the Defense. And they've rebranded many times, to be fair, in their history. They've become CSCA, they've become CCA, then eventually Steaua Bucharest. And that I think that was in, sorry, Steaua Bucharesti, which was in the 1961. Yeah, that was in 1961. And over the years, like they've been known as like they're the team for Romanian football. They were the first team from Eastern Europe to win the European Cup, which I'll talk about in a bit. But before that, just talk about a little bit in terms of the different sections of their history, which led to the little bit of confusing modern part of their history that we're in now. In the 50s, under the name CCA at the time, they won multiple league titles, they won lots of cups, and that's when they kind of established themselves as the dominant force in Romanian football. They won the European Cup in '86. They beat Barcelona. They then won the Cup Winners' Cup, the Super Cup the year after that in '87. They reached the European Cup final again in '89,
Got
but they
twatted
lost. Yeah,
to the great AC Milan.
yeah, that's the thing, to that great AC Milan side of '89. Yeah, and so like they had a very dominant spell in Europe. Like they obviously put themselves on the map from that perspective. But this is when things started to get interesting. So it was in 1998 that the football section actually separated from the parent sports club, and CSA Steaua Bucharesti was actually privatized. And now there's a businessman who actually owns a large stake of the club right now. His name's George Bakali. Interesting character. I'll talk more about him in a second because I was listening to a podcast from a Romanian journalist yesterday who gave some insight into his character. But yeah, 1998, they were privatized, right? And they were renamed FC Steaua Bucharesti. And at the same time, this other football team, CSA Steaua Bucharesti, was kind of going off in their direction. And George Bakali in 2003, he came in, gained control, right? He acquired a stake in the club. And then in 2011, this is where kind of tying it back to the Ministry of the Defense, there was a legal proceeding. And in 2011, the court ruling actually came in and they were trying to, the Ministry of the National Defense was claiming ownership around the Stour name, in air quotes, and everything to do with like the emblem, the honors, their history. And in 2017, following that court ruling, the club was actually forced to change its name to what is now called FCSB. And at the same time, CSA Steaua Bucuresti was re-established as a football team. And so at this point, you've got crossroads where you've got two teams, FCSB and you've got CSA Steaua Bucuresti. FCSB is the team that we're talking about because they're in the Europa League as it stands. They're about to play Man United this week. CSA Steaua Bucuresti are navigating the lower tiers of Romanian football. But the
Bit in the
two,
second tier now, I think.
yeah, correct. But yeah, they're both fighting for that kind of history, the logo, everything to do with the history of that football club.
So,
Uh,
this is where it'll be confusing. I'm going to try and put this in the very, very simple terms for people unfamiliar with the story. But the team that won the European Cup in the late 80s was Steaua Bucharest.
yep,
Famously beat Barcelona on penalties in Seville. Their goalkeeper, whose name escapes me, saved all four penalties from Barcelona, won 2-0 on penalties. They did have, I did look at it, not the most difficult route to the final, but well done. And for a Romanian team to win European Cup and then get to a final again a couple of years later, it's an incredible achievement. And people then remember the great Romania team that played in USA in 1994 with the great Georgi Hagi, Tottenham bought Gica Popescu, Ili Dumitrescu. It was a good time for Romanian football on the map, I guess. The team that won the European Cup, or what is now the Champions League, is called Steaua Bucharest.
yep,
There's now a team called Steaua Bucharest that's not Steaua Bucharest. Have I got that right? On simple
yeah.
terms.
I mean, you're saying it's simple terms, but it's still confusing. But yeah, that's correct.
So you can't call the team that we called Steaua Bucharest that won the European Cup in the late 80s, we can't call them Steaua Bucharest anymore because there's another team that's reformed in 2017 that's called Steaua Bucharest.
Correct. And this is where like the kind of note to their history in terms of who claims what is quite interesting. So the journalist that I was listening to, I think I can't remember his full name, but it was Theodore, but like very well respected journalist in Romania, it sounds like. And he was basically saying that in terms of the history and who claims what, it was as of October 2023, CSA Steaua Bucharest retains the records from 1947 to 1998, which includes that famous win,
European
as you
Cup.
just said. Pardon?
European Cup, yep.
European Cup, correct. And the records from 2003 onwards are associated with FCSB, which are the team that we're talking about that are going to play on Thursday. Now, this is interesting because that doesn't include all of the amazing history. But there was a national survey that was done that I found from I think the year 2020. So obviously it's 5 years ago. But FCSB is Romania's most popular club with 40.9% of fan support. Must say that was from 2020. So are these guys supporting a club that doesn't have the history that they think it does when they're trying to claim that it does, even though
I mean,
legally
it's absolutely batshit. What you're telling me is a club in the Romanian second division that was formed in 2017 but won the European Cup in the 80s.
that is the best way of summarizing it. It's it's bonkers. Like it is clearly just it's one of them where it's like there's legal crap and everything, but like
Yeah,
people know what they're supporting and the
it's
history behind the
it's
club.
really ugly, and I imagine for most people who don't know the story and are seeing who, Manchester United are playing Europa tomorrow night, and they're doing very well, by the way. If FCSB win, they go through. But for a long time, and I only am really familiar with the story because of people who know one of our patrons, Callan Mates, has spoke to me
Oh,
about it
of
in the
course,
past.
yeah.
Callan obviously provides his own content on the Premier League in Romania and is doing exceptionally well. He has obviously kind of given me some of the background story on what's happened. Otherwise, I would have just thought FCSB was just
Stalbooker.
someone fucking shortening Steaua Bucharest.
Me too. And I've always thought that, mate,
So I was, and for a while, I was like, well, what are you doing that for, man? What are you taking Bucharest out your name for? And
I can't remember if I told you this or not, but I've been to watch them play.
yeah, yeah.
I was on a stag do in Romania in like I think 2019 maybe. I've been to their stadium, really nice stadium by the way. It's I think I can't remember the capacity, but like 50,000 or something. Really modern facilities, really nice. But again, from when I was reading around, it sounds like they barely sell it out or anything. But yeah, that's a little bit on them to be honest. And George Bacali though, like that. I picked up some things on playstyle from this pod. It sounds like they adopt like positional play principles, which is quite a modern thing in terms of spacing, overloads, all of that. But like they sound like a very fast transition based team, so that'll be interesting to see if that pans out against Man United. It doesn't sound like they want to keep the ball too much. And yeah, you spoke about their campaign so far. I mean, domestically, they aren't doing amazing in the context of what you'd kind of expect from them. They are second. Well, it's a bit harsh. Like they're not outright winning it. Basically, they're
Who's
joint
top at
first,
the moment? Is
second.
it Cluj?
It's yeah, but there's two types of Cluj, aren't there? So there's one called like
What?
Univ. Yeah, don't, it's another rabbit hole, mate. Honestly, so there's Universitatea Cluj,
Oh,
who
of
are
course.
current.
A CFR Cluj is the one that I think we've seen in European
That's the one I
competition.
think we would have been thinking of when we think of Cluj. Yeah, so there's two types of Cluj, and the Cluj that are kind of joint top with FCSB on 41 points. They were actually seventh last year, so I don't know what the change has been
Okay.
for them to come and fly up. But within the Europa League, though, yeah, like you said, they're doing all right. I mean, they did get thumped by Rangers 4-0, but there's a couple of nil-nil draws in there. But they have won four of the seven they've played. They're just inside the top eight at the minute on 14 points, joint with yourselves, Tottenham, Lyon, and Anderlecht. So yeah, but that George Bakali, mate, I don't know if you've heard this.
No.
He sounds like a character. So basically, he obviously owns the club, right? And like they have a manager in place and stuff. But this guy, I watched a little clip where he'll have journalists round in his house or his palace, and he'll be giving the team news. He'll like say, "Oh, this guy's not going to play. He was crap on the weekend. But this guy's fat." Like literally saying things like that to journalists, and he dictates sometimes what happens. Yeah, really, like he's had legal proceedings against himself for like controversial things in his career. Like, it sounds like a proper dodgy bloke, but an interesting character. Sounds like he undermines management quite a lot and makes it about himself quite a lot. But yeah, he's someone that is, I think, in the Romanian league anyway. He's obviously invested a lot of money within the country since he's come into power, but I think he definitely divides opinion. But yeah, very interesting bloke. If people want to check him out, like just Google his name, you'll find that fucking batshit rabbit hole to go down on him. But
I was going to say you could absolutely find a rabbit hole with this story that but probably never ends with
yeah,
what essentially is these two clubs. Um, I do actually recommend reading the new club, CSA Steaua Bucharest, which by the way, if you saw their crest, you'd be like, yeah, that's the team that won the
yep.
European Cup in the 80s. They actually play in a stadium that holds 31,000. But if you read their Wikipedia page, I don't know if it's been edited by a fan or whatever, but it's like, yeah, FCSB is fake and they lied and they're traitors. And it's
They
like, oh, okay.
The two teams have ultras that kind of go against each other, and so it's become a rivalry between the two
Well,
clubs. Sorry, that
this will become a worldwide story when this team inevitably gets into the top division and they play each other.
yeah, I'm sure I remember reading
It's going to
somewhere
be a
that
big story.
they're gonna need like private investment to be able to actually get to that division because of legal restrictions.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure I remember reading that somewhere as well. Like mate, it's such a rabbit hole. It's bonkers.
There are two other fairly decent sized clubs in Bucharest as well, in Dynamo and Rapid. I remember
Yeah,
Tottenham playing Dynamo 2006. I don't remember Berbatov had one of his nights where you just couldn't touch him. But yeah, Dynamo and Rapid will be familiar to some of our older viewers and listeners as well. Yeah, that is a mad story.
pretty cool, but mad.
Yeah. So Manchester United are playing FCSB,
Correct,
who have never won a European trophy,
correct.
but never ceased playing, but actually did. Okay, interesting. Wish them luck. I mean, interested to hear from, and I know we've got people from Romania who listen to us and watch us. I'm interested to hear from you and tell us more about what you think, or if you support one of these clubs, and let us know. We'll finish with on this day, and I did allude to say that there was a little bit fantasy relevant, and you all thought I made a big. Actually, yeah, I did make a big mistake last week by pressing the wrong button very badly.
Oh,
But I wouldn't say it's probably my biggest FPL mistake ever. I think probably my biggest FPL mistake was probably 5 years ago
5 years
because this
ago.
was a chosen mistake.
It was
And
I'm trying to think what would have
I've
happened.
told you about this before.
Can I have a clue?
Yeah, Liverpool about to have a double game week.
Mane, Salah. No, no, no. Wasn't that?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was, yeah.
So on this day, 5 years ago, Liverpool played at West Ham United in the second of the now very infamous double game week from the 2019-20 season. To paint the picture going into this game from a league table perspective, Liverpool had gone 40 Premier League games without defeat, winning 35 and drawing five, which was at the time was the third longest such run behind only Arsenal's Invincibles and Nottingham Forest from 1978. They'd won their previous 14 Premier League games. That was only the fourth time that had been achieved. Victory for Liverpool in this fixture at West Ham would take them to 70 points from 24 games. They had won 22 and drawn one of their first 23 games. Victory in this game in hand for Liverpool, which was obviously mood because of Liverpool's involvement in the Club World Cup, would take them 19 points clear in the Premier League in January. Yeah, if you think it's over now, legitimately it was that year.
That Liverpool team over that period was absolutely absurd.
Yeah. When you think about it, and obviously they did win at West Ham that night. I don't think I'm spoiling that for anyone. When you think about it, they went through a period of a whole year of not losing in the Premier
They're
League.
bonkers.
And they'd won 23 of 24. They'd won the last 9 games, I think, of the run in the previous season. That was the season when they finished on like 97 points and didn't win the league, unbelievably. So across the previous 38 games they would have played, they would have been on over 100 points
Absolutely mind
and
blowing.
hadn't lost over that period. Joke. Yeah, I mean, everybody knew it in January that the title was over and done with. But of course, part of this story is the FPL side of this, because this was the second part of a double game week. The first part was played at Molineux in the midweek earlier. And there were a lot of triple captaincies activated. Do you want to have a guess how many?
How many? A mil?
No, it wasn't that many. It was only about 500,000.
All right.
I read an article that was written by our good friend David Munday on Fantasy Football Scout at the time in between the two games about how many triple captaincies were activated. It was 500,000. How many do you think were? It was roughly that. How many do you think were active on Mo Salah?
Three quarters of that. 375,000. More. Less.
There was more on Mano.
Whoa, was it?
Yeah, and
Oh,
I couldn't remember that in my head. Maybe I didn't
nah.
know the numbers at the time. It wasn't a lot between them, but I think it was sort of like 230,000 Salah and 270,000 Mano.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know
And,
why in my
and
head.
they were priced the same basically. They were both, I think,
Yeah.
12.6. Mane was just on this mad streak, mate.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
And he
And
was legitimately competing with Salah. And it was difficult to fit the two in at the time because Kevin De Bruyne was playing really well. And
I
I
want to say
think,
Sun was an option quite
yeah,
a
he,
lot.
he definitely would have been. And obviously Kane as well. And actually, Tottenham began to suffer in that period, in sort of like January of that period. Actually, no, of course, Mourinho being charged by this point, isn't it? I'm thinking about the wrong season. But yeah, Son would have been an option. Kane obviously would be an option. There'd be other players as well. I don't know if Aguero was probably about for City, maybe. Must have been, I should imagine. So it
I'm
was
getting my years
alternatives. It
confused.
was difficult for people to put Salah and Mane in, let's put it that way. A lot of people had one or the other, and then had Trent, and then quite often had like a Robertson or a Van Dijk to go with that. So it was. I don't think it's ever kind of been more heightened than this kind of actual versus on the triple cap. One player versus another, and almost have a 50-50 split and from the same team. So you might have had it where it's like, oh yeah, it's Salah versus Kane, for example. Two players from the same team, only team basically doubling. Sorry, West Ham. No one was triple captain like Mikel Antonio, I don't suppose, at the time. Um, it was just split. But I couldn't remember in my mind that Mane had more. That's
So
incredible.
what was your mistake though?
I'll get onto that. So obviously I went Mane triple captaincy because that was the route I was on. Anyway, they're 1-0 up at Wolves. I mean, a few people would have gone Firmino as well, actually. And Firmino had this really good record away from home at the time. And he scored in the 2-1 victory at Wolves. But of course, famously, Mane went off after half hour.
Could not make it up. Could you? I remember I triple captain Salah, and even I was like, "Wow, what is my luck there?"
I mean, as bad beats go, yeah. Is there any luck in fantasy football? Well, yeah, you can't
All
plan
skill,
for
mate.
that. I remember our poor friend Mark McGegan, FPL General, captain Kevin De Bruyne very bravely the season before, and he went off injured after about 20 minutes against Tottenham in the first game. Same thing had happened to him. I don't know if Mark had the De Bruyne Mane two in a row, Jesus, but it was a lot of us in this same boat together with Mane, and all you had to do was just sit there and just pray
Just
that
got to laugh.
I've now got to get through like 2.5 hours of Salah and pray that he doesn't go off. And he didn't against Wolves. He didn't. They won 2-1 Liverpool. But in the game at West Ham, which I guess people had kind of definitively concluded, well, if they win this one, they've definitely won the title because it's the game in hand, and that's 16 points to 19 points. Clearly unassailable lead. Salah scores the opener from a penalty. Foul on Divock Origi, who I presume would come into the team in place of Salah, Mane, sorry.
Mane, yeah.
He scored a penalty in the first half, and you kind of knew as a Mane triple captain you weren't going to get away with Salah doing nothing. The killer blow was then the assist for Oxlade-Chamberlain in the second half that then leads to the bonus that goes with it, etc., etc. And obviously the difference between the two was seismic. The mistake that I made wasn't that I triple captain Mane; it was unlucky. It was the fact that I then decided to take Salah on the weekend after and not go Mane to Salah.
What
I,
did you
I,
do?
I can't remember why I'd done it. I don't know if I might have had like insane value in Mane or something. Um, but Liverpool had Southampton at home the weekend after, and it wasn't like Southampton now. It went like terrible. Um, but I decided to keep hold of Mane. I don't know if there might have been a hope or a chance he was going to play, maybe
Oh,
or
you
something.
kept him.
I
Okay.
can't remember. Anyway, Salah scored twice, didn't he? This time, all the captaincies were on him, so it's 32 points, dead. Then the following week, they played at Norwich. It's like, well, I can't take that no more. And by this point, it was like, yeah, Mane's not going to be ready to start. So I flipped him, went Mane to Salah, too late. And you know what happened, didn't you?
What did Mane play?
Mane came off the bench, scored the only goal, and Liverpool
No.
won 1-0.
I can't remember that.
Yeah, it's honestly true that. And he just, okay. So it was bad luck at the start, it was bad luck at the end, but in the middle, the big mistake was not buying Salah for the Southampton game. It was right in front of me. I don't know what the stubborn reason was behind it. It'll be there somewhere in the archives of the podcast if people want to find it, why I made that decision. I don't think I particularly want to know.
I think
But
someone's gonna go back and listen now.
oh, definitely. I mean, you can find it. It'll be like late January, early February 2020. So that would be season three, I think, of Planet FPL. I think I've got that right. It'll be season three main podcast. You can find it somewhere. Probably around the time of a chip strategy podcast, ironically as well. I should imagine. So yeah, got killed on that. I won't be getting killed next week on the triple captaincy because I think everyone's on the same player or not on it at all.
Yep.
I do intend to go with Mo myself. I don't think it's a super double. I don't think anybody does, but I'm not convinced there'll be a better opportunity. And you know what? I don't actually foresee him going through the two games and not scoring and
Yeah.
extra 10 points or so. Fun. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think the winners might be those who used it on Haaland in game week two. Might prove to have been the best call on the triple captaincy.
I hope so.
Is that what you did as well? Yeah.
That's
You and
what I
Such
did.
both
Yeah.
do that. Such did
Yeah.
that as
That was
well.
because of you, darling. I wouldn't have considered it if it weren't for a pod
What,
you
because I
mentioned.
didn't own him, you thought you'd completely bury
Nah,
me. That's
there
why
was
I
a
did a minus 56, you prick, to give you a chance.
no, there was a pod you did in the maybe in the summer where you were kind of going through when it could be an option, and I remember you laying the land that like yeah,
That
it's
was the
not gonna
best
it's,
single game week, possibly
yeah,
for the whole season. Yeah.
and that's the only reason I did it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have considered it. So gracias.
All right. You're welcome. That is all for, I think that was a very long Clayton and James show.
Yeah, that
Sorry.
was.
Right, we're going to disappear then. Clash of Correspondents tomorrow said Chelsea West Ham with Gary Mantle, Chris Stone. And obviously, yesterday's with Sean Norton and Dan Lord on the Merseyside derby. Obviously, discussing the two teams who double in 24 is already out and available for you as well. Ask James on Friday will be at 1 o'clock UK time. If you want to support the show and catch up on podcasts such as me and Clayton previewing the final match day for UCL Fantasy this week, you can do that at www.patreon.com/Planet FPL. Just leaves me to say thanks very much, Clates. Be nice to each other, everyone. Cue music, please, man child.